That was amazing. Um, yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much for having me. Good afternoon. And it's really brave and sort of amazing that so many people came as well. So thank you for that. Yeah, I want to start with rock. Okay? Start with a rock. Um, and okay. So last year, a few years ago, I decided to on holiday down in Cornwall, and I decided, um, slightly ambitiously, to try and swim. I just finished reading To the Lighthouse, classic by Virginia Woolf, and we were sailing tonight, and she wrote To the Lighthouse when she was. So I thought I would swim to the lighthouse, and yeah, and the sea had some slightly different ideas, and so it was quite wavy. Which I kind of realised as I went out through the rocks, and I got swept out. And somebody called the RNLI. They sent a helicopter, and then they found me, and then they sent the jet ski, and they picked me up, and so I didn't drown. And the next day, I was sitting on the beach, feeling pretty tossed by the waves, should we say? And you know, and it wasn't just the physical side of it; it was kind of emotional and mental. And my family and my your best friend's family, and I was, uh, and my wife came. She's a beach coach. She gave me this rock, and so the rock is there to remind me to be more of a rock and less tossed by the waves. And I find it a really helpful and comforting rock. And and it reminds me that life, work, relationships, and mental health, you get these waves come in, and the question is whether we get thrown around by them or whether you find a way to get grounded by it. So I'm going to talk about the intersection about three parts: architecture, neurodivergence, and mental health, and about what helps me. Maybe one bit might help you, or maybe not. But to be more like rock. Uh, and then I'm also going to talk about a movie. And I don't know if anybody is old enough to remember this movie. It's a great movie. Um, and here's a clip. So three guys go out to hunt a shark. The shark hunts it. I love the way they toast their scars. It's a bit of a bloke, maybe an old bloke thing to do, but they're really proud of their scars. Part of what they are. So I have my list of scars as well. That's my list. So I cut off this finger when I was two, a little under two. Got scars on the eye, broken nose, some carpentry things. Um, yeah, but the best one is this: I came off my bike, fell off, broke my femur. I've got a titanium plate and 5 screws in it. And when I'm in the pub with the guys, that's the one where I like get some respect from it. So for me in some people like me, physical scars are a badge of honor, that guys to me. But we all carry, mental and emotional scars as well. And I think very much, bereavements, burnouts, anxiety, depression, um, and they're very much physical scars are kind of like a tattoo, a kind of reminder of where we've been. But the mental scars and the emotional scars are much more so what what makes us what we are. And I suppose what I'm saying is it's okay. It's okay to talk about physical and emotional and mental scars, and that's part of it. So I have a mental and a neurodivergent story as well. And it started with 11 years ago. My daughter was diagnosed with dyspraxia. She was 11. And so I'm a loving dad, and I went on Amazon and I bought her a book. And I said, there you go, Millie, go and fix yourself. Um, and and 6 years later, I picked it up and I decided to read it. Because I thought that'd be a good thing to do. And when I read it, I was like, oh, this reminds me of someone, and it reminded me of me. And then a little bit after that, I was on a run with Andrew, and I we had a conversation running, but it's really good because it enables me to kind of have conversations. Andrew was the first person at work that I'd said, "Hey, Andrew, I think I'm neurodivergent," and I don't even think yeah. And he was very supportive of that. Thank you for that, and that encouraged me to keep on having conversations. And I also started, scrolling through Instagram, and they're quite good in a kind of way, those Instagram feeds. And then, fast forward 3 years or 2.5 years to 2024, and I did that. It was actually quite easy. I just went to my doctor, just wrote him an email, and he came back to me. So that was the query. He came back to me and spoke, and then ended up doing this formal assessment, which you did through Psychiatry UK, through the NHS. And you do have to love filling in forms if you want to go down this route. And I don't mind filling in forms, so that's fine. And then you waited nearly a year, 11 months, and I got the pass mark for ADHD is 42%. I got 73%, so I was proud of myself. But I stands for attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. And there's two parts. There's attention deficit and there's hyperactivity. And I passed both, so I do both of those. And yeah. So sometimes that feels like a superpower, and sometimes it feels really, really safe. And as a 55-year-old middle class, privately educated, professional, white, cis male, it was a bit odd kind of doing that. But I did feel kind of, but I started telling a small number of close friends, and 3 of them said the same thing, which was this: don't believe that nonsense, do you? And I have to say, them saying that had a knock-on effect on our friendships. And I know I ticked lots of boxes of privilege, but even with that, when you say neurodivergent, there's a kind of a recoil to that for some people. And it's hard to imagine what people with less privilege than I know that I have, or few advocates would do with that. So there's lots of work to be done. One of the things I did do, which is probably the most, my own self-diagnosis of all my kind of, and I split it into kind of more positive and less positive. And I did sit down with my director, and I said, "Can I just talk to you for 20 minutes?" And bless her, she just sat there, and I just went through this whole list. And she was like, and at the end of it, I kind of talked about this before the policy, and I said, and that was really supportive and kind of amazing, to be honest. But there's, there are pluses and there are minuses. Large noisy groups that can be very difficult. Sometimes I've got huge energy and I can just power through something. Sometimes I just think, well, that's great. But quiet room that we have is amazing. But it doesn't exist in a vacuum either. And I want to kind of segue across and it's how perhaps it intersects with real life and loss. And I want to talk about my nephew, David. So David was intelligent, funny, adventurous. He's my favourite. And I'd always make sure I negotiated, so I sat with him in the family gatherings. Uh, yeah. But in March 2014, he took ecstasy at a party, and it was something wrong with it, and he became paranoid, and he went home and he hung himself. And my mum, his mum, my sister, found him, took him to hospital, put him on life support. But 4 days later, they switched off the life support, and brain damage and done when he was 23. So that was really hard. And my son was like 15, and I carried his coffin, his funeral, and I felt a lot of guilt because I hadn't spent more time when him and his parents been divorced. And I felt like I should have. I look back and I wish I'd stepped in more and been more closer to him, but I didn't. But I didn't. I was also very focused on his mum, my sister, and my parents, and my son. So I didn't breathe and cry and do any of that stuff. I just did what I had to do. And I just focused on being strong. And my head was just spinning round and round. And I developed a really unhealthy relationship. I developed some mental ill health. I looked back and it was definitely unwell mentally. I couldn't go, I'd often not engage with people if they were unwell. I'd back off. If there was something on TV about death, I would leave the room. I'd get angry at weird conversations. And a psychologist friend of mine shared this with me, that if a tree grows large and tall and rigid, when the wind and storms come, the tree is brittle and it will break. So that was me. I just broke when David died. And I was trying to hold everything. I was trying to be the strong person in the family, and just snap things up. And that friend taught me this, which is that a tree that remains flexible bends when the wind blows and can withstand harsh shocks. And this line, that resilience he talks about, it's not the act of being strong, but of being flexible. And resilience, I don't think it's being stoic, soldiering on. Resilience is about being able to bend, to cry, to talk, to seek help, to rest, to just lie on the sofa with the dog, watch Netflix series, or to let other people live. And 7 years after they died in 2021, I took part in a program called The Grief Journey with some friends. A really good friend of mine, whose brother had died. We kind of queued each other up to kind of do it together, and neither of us could leave because then we knew that we'd let down the other guy. So we did this thing together, and it helped. And as part of that, I wrote 2 letters to David. One was apologising for the way I could have been a better uncle, and the other one was us telling him, hey, I really wish you'd been open up about all the stuff that's going on in your life, and that I found out after he died. And for his 30th birthday, his mum, my sister, and my other sister, we went to his grave first time. That thing I never done. And we celebrated, bought some really good champagne. She loves champagne and flowers and parts of blue. And things shifted, you know. The wound didn't disappear. That's not how grief goes, but I began to heal, the rawness. When I broke my leg, I kind of segued back to that, when I was lying in the road screaming, and the race marshal was a bike race, and he said, hey, you can't just lie back. But I couldn't move, I took the ambulance, I had to go to the hospital. I couldn't heal by myself. In the same way, when David died, I couldn't heal by myself. I needed some professional help, something to do that. So I miss David, and I tell it, and I celebrate his life. He is amazing. And then moving to our world, construction, we have suicide is the leading cause of death in construction workers by a long way. And during Mental Health Awareness Week, just this last year, I worked on TVC, and I've got 45 members of the construction site, came into the room, and I told David's story, and that was fine, everything. And honestly, and then afterwards in the canteen, I was sitting there, and this guy came up to me and said, "Oh, good job." He was an electrical team leader. He said, "I got my team together, someone could make it." And we had a box talk about it, and a toolbox talk. And so yeah, great job, mate. It's really helpful. And I was like, wow, something I did was meaningful and helpful. And I think this was the most meaningful thing I've done in the 40 years of my world in architecture. Was that. Um, but it's a terrible thing. This, in the construction industry, last year the health suffered 51 fatal injuries. People falling or things landing on them, but there were 507 suicides. So it's terrible. Got to do something about the wider construction industry. And Papyrus writes that many people with neurodivergent conditions report facing discrimination, bullying, and marginalisation of society, which leads to feelings of isolation, hopelessness, despair. These negatives can impact mental health and increase the risk of suicide. And then there's this study from Pittsburgh that autistic adults are 25 times more likely to make a suicide attempt than autistic adults, which is just which isn't great. And we have, but we do what we can. And we were the first architecture company, certainly in the UK, I'm pretty sure, to have a neurodiversity policy. So that's amazing, and please there. It helps. And that Andrew and Kristen and Zipper and Laura and others have spent a long time working. Kristen really molded it. She kind of made it happen. Some of the others a little more chaotic on the way. And now lots of other architecture companies have either kind of borrowed it, copied it, or doing the same thing. And that's something to be proud of. And one of the things in there is this self-assessment bit. So my one is, on the side, it's like I need to take a 15-minute break every now and then. If I've had 3 meetings back to back, my mind flies, and I just need to go away from everybody. And then I'm like, okay, go. Like actually going off for like a 2-day trip to look at facades when you're in the same room with people for 6 days, it's actually really hard for me, and I have to make some excuse like I'm not feeling very well and going to a meeting. But my director knows about this. And, do those things, and the quiet room is great. Christmas party's a bit hard. I kind of have to. I can do it for 90 minutes, and that's great. And then I need a break. And I have NAB, the quietest desk in the level in Ayrshire in the main office, and yeah, every time someone tries to move it, we have a little conversation. And they go, "No, you can stay there. That's fine." It's by the PPA. Nobody else wants to. It's by the PPA in the toilets. Nobody else would. And headphones are fantastic. And we do it by work as well. So Two Ruskin Square was a government building. It was, we did it for Stamp, but it was for the Home Office, and they had a neurodiversity policy as part of it, as the workplace, about these quiet zones and everything, and that went through to how we redesigned the reception as well. And we won, and as part of that, it was the best commercial building in Britain, 2025, for the which was really nice. So it kind of it's a whole cycle. And talk about architecture. Richard Rogers, who was the kind of trailblazer for neurodiversity, said this: dyslexia allows you to look at a broad element and forget what's normally done. Is this going to play? like most architects of my generation, thought Blade Runner and Rooker House Speech. He's a replicant of these superpowers, but he's also got frailties. And I think I always kind of felt like a little bit of a bit like that. Some things I was really, really good at, and some things I was really, really bad at. And I felt outsider. So going on, it's made me ask, how do I live? How do I keep going in a more sustainable way? How do I build a life that's not just always on the edge and always being tossed by the waves? And I'm focused on being still. I went to Carthage, Amanda, and I spent a decision on the phone. I took all the social media, the news, everything off. I'm not looking at anything for a week. And it's an emergency. Contact Amanda, and I just focused on reading about being still. That's really helpful. And last year also, I did walk the Camino with my daughter. She's 22, and we walked from Porto, the ancient pilgrimage route from Porto to Santiago. We went for 10 days. And it talks about leaving behind the clamor of the city and just the peaceful nature of it. And it was a wonderful experience. But they also talk about how you can develop an intention from it, that you often come away with something you weren't expected to get. And the one I got from it is, well, not quite as eloquent, but don't get involved in nonsense conversations. And there was a polite way of putting it. I forgot what that is now, but it's just like some things I just have to let go, to be still, to create peace. Neurodivergent people living in a neurotypical world, things aren't easy a lot of times, and there's an overlap, but there's also not. I think people with mental health challenges, there's living in a world for people who have mental health is challenging. And it really helps to have a friend. And a friend of mine, psychologist friend, came across this really old phrase for the men, that your wound is as deep as the sea. And really, she was helping me to talk about how it's really helpful to have a friend. I think a lot of times you don't reach out to people, or you don't accept friendship, because you don't know what to say. And you try and fix people, or people try and fix you. And really often that's, you don't know the answers. And the answer isn't to have the answer. The answer is just to be with somebody and say, your wound is as deep as the sea. And she said, I'm here for you. I don't understand what you're going through, but I love you, not pushing you away. And a couple of years ago, a lot of times I go out off to the countryside, get away from everything. And a few years ago, I did the Pennine Way, to Scotland. And on the fourth night, I was 6 days, and I went through the night on my own, and I reached this part just as dawn was rising. And for me, the photo is a metaphor of the kind of darkness of parts of life. But the sun comes up, and it'll be over. And takeaways: mental health challenges are real, valid. If you're struggling, it's not character, it's part of who you are. Seeking help is wisdom, not weakness. Go to a physio for a broken leg in an operation when you're hurting. I've gone back to some counselling recently because I had some things. A friend take his life, and checks a bit difficult at times. We can design spaces which work for neurodivergent minds, and we can do an amazing job of that, and do that with the Neurodivergence direction. For me, it really helps. My New Year's resolution this year about being still, it's really it's helped me out, and we could be a friend, and that can save a life. Just be a friend.
Everything, guys.